There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. It is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Tackling Accessible PDF Challenges, hosted by the Maryland Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program, IT Accessibility Initiative. It's a long name, I know. Usual housekeeping items. We have captioning available today. You should be able to enable that from the closed captioning button on your menu ribbon. If you want to reference this webinar later on, it is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel within a week. I also sent out the slide deck and sample documents today about an hour ago. If you did not receive those, don't worry, they will be attached to the email with the recording later on. If for whatever reason there's any issues with them, please let me know. And I will get back to you with either new versions or try and solve the problem for you. One thing to note is those sample documents are not 100% accessible because they are intended for practice use and to demonstrate the issues and how to fix them. So we'll be going through them today and showing how to fix those. So if you run the accessibility check on those, there will be errors, and that's intentional, okay? Finally, one other note about this presentation is it is kind of building on the skills and knowledge from previous webinars on document accessibility. So I'm not going to be going into a lot of the basics of PDF remediation. That's been covered by previous webinars by us. If you attended the NFB CINA's boutique last month, it was on PDF accessibility. It was a really good webinar. We'll be kind of building on those skills from that. So if you have more questions specifically about that, you can go back and view those recordings. You can reach out to me and we can discuss other training opportunities, or you can search online for various other resources. Pretty much anyone involved in the accessibility world has touched on this topic before. So there's a lot of free resources out there that are excellent for this purpose. With that though, I do want to go over a quick refresher about the Adobe Suite. So the main thing is that Adobe Acrobat uses what are called tags. These are definitions of elements for interpretation. Essentially, a tag tells the program this thing should act like this. So in the case of like an image, it is tagged as a figure. And so that way, other Adobe programs, or if you export it to Word or to something else, understand that, okay, this is an image, I need to treat it as such and communicate that to other things. Tags read similar to HTML. There are some differences, but by and large, they're kind of the same and organized in the same manner. So both Adobe and HTML have P for paragraph. They have H1 for level 1 headings, and then they have tables for tables. There are some differences, such as Adobe uses figure, whereas HTML uses IMG for image. And there will be plenty more we talk about later on. The important thing to remember with this is that Adobe does capitalize them. When you enter them into Adobe, I believe it automatically capitalizes them for you, but it is something to be aware of as you're working through a PDF. Without tags, assistive technology cannot interpret the document correctly. While some of the more powerful screen readers, such as JAWS or NVDA, or some of the other control systems like Dragon, which you can use your voice to control the computer, they will make their best effort, and Adobe Acrobat will try and reciprocate. Without this critical step, they won't be able to, they might make mistakes, or they won't be able to capture everything that's in that document. So that's why we need to make sure we're tagging a document correctly and putting in the necessary information and context for users so that they can get the meaning and information in that document that you've created. If you want to know more about Adobe and how tags work and more of the tags and other information about them, you can visit our website, mdod.maryland.gov. Under the resources heading on the left, you will see at the bottom of that list is IT Accessibility Initiative. You can click that and that'll take you to our page. We have various resources and links to document accessibility and to previous webinars. With that, let's go ahead and talk about today and our goals here. First, we want to explain the more complex tags, such as lists and tables. So things that we won't be able to necessarily do with just the reading order, or might require us to do some additional work after Adobe has done the basic tagging on its own. A second thing is we want to work through basic fillable form creation. This is really important because it gives those with disabilities, when they are looking at a form, they can fill it out on the computer independently if we do it correctly. Whereas if you just hand them a scan or something, well, they have to print it out, they'll probably have to get help, or it'll be a struggle to fill it out because they're going to be using other technologies and it might take longer. So I want to make sure that fillable forms are created accessibly, and when we send them to them, they're able to do it without any additional help. And then finally, we'll take some time to discuss problematic situations and solutions, trying to address some of the more uncommon errors that come through the accessibility checker. And if you guys have any questions, I can try and address them during that time. So we're going to start with lists. One of the important things to know about lists is that the reading order tool and the accessibility tool in Acrobat actually doesn't have a list option. So when you're drawing that box around things and pressing one of the buttons to assign it a tag, there isn't a list button. So we need to get a little creative about this. There's a couple different ways to deal with this. The first one, which I didn't list on here, is working from another program like Word, where if you actually use a list there and send it to Adobe, it will be tagged as a list. You won't have any issues. If that's not done, or if it's just plain text, now you have to change the tags. And this is where we're getting into the tag structure instead of the reading order tool. So if it's not tagged already, you want to start by tagging the desired text as a paragraph. Either you can use the reading order tool to do that, or if you are confident and comfortable with it, you can highlight the text and then in the tag structure, right click and select create tag from selection. We want to make sure we're in that tag structure tool because that's where we're going to be setting up the list. That option is the last button on the left after reading order. And then we're going to double click the paragraph tag and then change it to L, which is for list. And okay, I see a raised hand. You should be able to. I was hoping to answer questions later, but if you have a question, you can put it in chat form. Oh, no, I see it in Q&A. Okay. Is there UL or OL options? Oh, that is a good question. So for anyone not familiar with HTML, UL and OL are the two kinds of lists in HTML, unordered and ordered list. There isn't an option in Adobe for that. It's simply list. So the type or the ordering of the list is up to you and how you present it visually and how you tag it. So and then the bullets or numbers or whatever you use as the precursor for the actual content, that's up to you to what you put into there. So thank you. That was a very good question. Okay, back to this. So each bullet point then has to be nested inside a list item, LI, and then also a L body or list item body. It's a little bit different from HTML, which has list and then list item and then content. Instead, we now have an extra step in between where it's list, then list item, then list body, and then the actual content. So the example I have on screen, you have list as your starting point. Underneath that, nested inside that, is 2 list items. And then each of those has an L body nested inside them. And then finally, the content is nested inside the L body. So if you think about it as a collapsible menu, if you open the list, you would see 2 list items. If you opened one of the list items, you would see list body. And then if you open that, then you would see the actual content. Doesn't change at all the appearance in the document itself, but this is simply how Adobe organizes it. The reason we want to do this is because if we don't tag it as a list, then screen readers and other assistive technology will interpret it simply as text and it'll read it as such. Depending on how you've tagged it or how Adobe has tagged it automatically, it might read as one entire paragraph. It might split up into different items. So we want to make sure we're conveying the correct syntax to users. Another good reason is because most of these kinds of AT are able to filter by element types. So let's say they've already read your document and they open it up again and they know what they need is just in a list. So a screen reader user can press L to filter by lists and move through just that type of element, and they can find it quickly versus having to scan through the entire document again. So conveying that syntax is really important to users. Next element type we're going to talk about is tables. So tables are taggable through the reading order tool. It can be a little challenging to mark individual cells though. Usually when you create a table and put it through the auto tagger, it is generally pretty good, but it's still good to know the structure of it because you might end up having to edit it, especially if you get an irregularity error in the accessibility checker. So tables are divided into rows, TRs. Each row then contains the cells for each column. So we have a 6x5 table on screen here. The first row is black with white text because it's the heading cells. And inside that row, there's 4 other cells, TH. TH is the heading cell that create the columns. And then the next row again has 4 cells. Technically we have 5 on screen. It's just the first column is just there for purposes of explaining the rows. But then that's how those columns are formed. It's really important to have the heading cells because that is what maintains the relationship between data for users, especially screen reader users, because that way when they move to like row 3, column 2, they'll hear both the cell's contents and then the heading. So they don't have to try and match it themselves. It does it automatically. Currently, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a way to mark headings for row. Like in Word, you can mark first column to add that additional label from the left-handmost column. Hopefully that's something Adobe will put into place at some point, but for now, there isn't a way to do that like you can in HTML. There is the possibility that because I know you can use JavaScript in Adobe PDFs, that you would be able to use that to do so. However, anytime I've experimented with JavaScript, it has slowed the program down significantly to the point where it's almost unusable. So if you want to look into that, by all means, and if you figure out a way to do that without causing issues with the program, please let me know because I would love to know how to do that. Thank you. Couple key notes to remember about this is that you do want to avoid merged cells if possible. The Adobe tagging system doesn't handle it well. And then also that's kind of a good general practice for tables for users anyway with using assistive technology. Usually because might introduce errors in the reading order or in the assignment of headings, or in other cases where it might mess with their ability to enter data and such. So it's just general good practice to avoid it, especially with Adobe, because our empty cells still need a tag. And that's, again, that irregularity error that might come up where it says, okay, your last row in this table, because it's empty, if you only create the cells for the first 3 columns, but the other rows have 4 cells in them, Adobe's going to tell you, hey, there's a problem here. There's a missing cell code and the numbers aren't matching up. So that's why we want to make sure that any cells, even if they're empty, also have a tag for them. And then finally, fillable forms. Form creation requires 2 parts. So there's the prepare form, and then there's the accessibility tool again. When you create a form, Adobe will scan the document you've selected and try to place in the form fields where it detects things like underscores or boxes or circles, depending on what's there graphically, and then whatever context is around it, it'll try and assign names. So in the case of the example on screen, this is actually the first page of our assistive technology loan program, where the loan application lists first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, social security number, ID type, which is actually a drop down, ID number, and expiration date. The form created those using the text that was close enough to it that it thinks should be connected, and then it was drawn trying to use underlines. In some cases, when I created that document, I had it as a blank space, so I had to put it in manually. That's something we'll be showing in the demonstration later. But for most purposes, when you first create that form, it's going to generate these fields for you. As of the last 4 or 5 months, Adobe had updated and now has the capability to add additional types of form fields, such as checkboxes and radio buttons. Previously, it pretty much made everything a text field, but now it doesn't, which is excellent. Again, less work on our end. However, there's usually a lot of cleanup we still have to do after it does this, particularly in labeling and then sometimes formatting, because it won't assign general formatting unless you have like preferences you've already set, and I'll show you how to do that later. So the key rules when creating a form and making it accessible. First, you have to add labels. As I mentioned, Adobe is going to try and use surrounding text to add those labels for you. However, it's only going to fill in the name of the field. So we need to edit the properties of it. You can do so by either double-clicking the field or by right-clicking it and going to the context menu and select Edit Field Properties. In there, the first tab will have the general information. So there'll be a name and a tooltip field. Both of those fields should have the label for the field, and it should match exactly. The reason for that is because when they first use it, they'll hear name, but tooltip will come up if they press help, or if they hover over it. Excuse me. In some cases, when they're still working in that field and they try and refresh it. So that's why we need it to have both in there. The second thing you need to do is notify users of formatting or character limits that you put on the field. So for example, for a phone, we need to tell them phone and then XXX dash XXX dash quadruple X. Or for state, if it's not a drop down and we're saying just enter the abbreviation for it, we need to tell them use 2 characters. That way, a user, when they first hear it or see it, they'll know, okay, this is the format I need to enter this data in. You can do that outside of the field as like part of the instructions or part of the label. However, it's best practice to make it part of the label and the properties of the field, because that way you have it in the tooltip, so it's available if they hover over it, and then B, so that a user who is just tabbing through a field to field to field and kind of skipping the regular text, it will still hear or see the formatting that is required for that field. And then finally, the third thing is you need to manually assign the order in both the forms tool and the accessibility tool. Those are two different reading orders. The first one in the prepare forms tool, which is on screen, it's on the right side, about halfway down after the alignment and distribution buttons, there's the fields list. That is all the fields that it has created. And you can manually reorder those. Initially, it's going to say it's ordered by structure. As soon as you click and drag anything, it'll change it to manual order. But if not, you can click the first button next to fields, which is the menu order or the reading order for it. And that way you can assign how the field or how the form is read by everyone. So anyone who is using this with just keyboard or with voice control or with keyboard and mouse, if they press tab or shift tab, that list is what defines that order. Then we need to make sure we go into the accessibility tool and assign it the reading order in there. So that way the form is correctly part of the entire document interspersed with the instructions. So it makes it a single reading order for someone who's using something like a screen reader or magnification software with reading capability, anything like that. The reason for that is because otherwise it's going to treat it as two separate parts, and something like a screen reader will instead read all the instructions and then read all the form fields, or vice versa. So we need to make sure it makes sense logically and goes along with the correct instructions so that we're eliminating any possibility of misinterpreting the document or the form or the instructions. I do want to point out it's a lot easier to start with an accessible PDF or with another document type. When I created the ATLP form, I used Word initially, so that one way I sent it to Adobe, it had a clean sheet to work with. All the instructions were already there, the headings were there, alt text was there, and all I had to do was prepare the form and then mix it in with the instructions in the reading order. So it eliminated a lot of the extra work and the possibility of Adobe misinterpreting where things are. If you're working off of like a scan document or like an Excel sheet or some other kind of table, you're introducing more ways for it to be problematic, because if you're using a table for presenting purposes instead of data purposes for this, it can sometimes interfere with the reading order when you're trying to assign it with the tags, because Adobe, even if visually you don't see a table there, Adobe knows there's a table there and it's going to try and force that on it. And that can get problematic. It's fixable, but it creates a lot more work for you. So the easiest way is how I'm going to describe this with the blank slates and drawing them in manually. And then finally, as I mentioned, you need to tag and assign the reading order after creating the form. One useful trick I've discovered is when you're clicking and dragging the box around the form field, include the label. So in the case of like the first name on screen, I would draw the box around first name and the form field. So that way, when it tags the form field and assigns it its reading order, it will connect it with the text that it was that is part of, or it's its label. Like it adds it right into there. So in this case, loan applicant information would be the first item, first name would be the second item, and then it would assign the form field the third item, and then put middle name down to number 4. If I just tag the form field as itself, there's a chance Adobe is going to be like, oh, okay, and then it'll just shove it down to the bottom of the reading order, and you have to click and drag it. And I have found Adobe to be resistant sometimes with assigning this reading order with form fields. So it's a lot easier if you connect it to something else in the form, like its label or instructions or something. Okay. So now I'm going to get into the actual demonstration. We're going to talk a lot more about the various tools and some other options here. I do encourage you guys to use chat or Q&A as I'm doing this to ask questions, or if there's something you want me to address, this will be the best time to do so. So I'm going to open up the first sample document. So there were two I sent you, well, three technically, but the Word document is just what I used to create this. So if you want to play with it, the Word document's there for you. But this is the first one, which is the sample document, where we don't have a form at all yet. If we're going to start with the list. So on the left side, this like Z looking icon is the reading order. Under it is the tags, kind of looks like a luggage tag. So it's the last item in that list. So the tag tree or tag structure, they call it a tree for good reason, because you're nesting items inside of each other and it builds off of it. So one thing I want to point out, so here's our figure. When I click the tag, a box is drawn around what is inside that. So in this case, that's our logo at the top of the page. If you notice, there's a paragraph tag above it. If I click that, there's no box drawn on the document. So that means it's probably empty. The reason for that is because when you create a document in Word, if you're creating like extra spaces by pressing Enter or Tab or something, those will read as blanks, but they still technically exist because you've entered a character. It's just a character you can't see. So Adobe's going to try and tag it. And that's why there's these blank tags in here. Depending on what screen reader you're using, these might be red, they might not be. For our purposes, it's probably best to clean it up because we're already going in here to make, to fix this. So I can just click the tag and then I can press delete and it's gone. Great. You can do that with any tag technically, but it's a good way to get rid of those extra tags that are empty or something, just to make this easier for our purposes. But as I go down through this by pressing the down arrow key, you can see what's being highlighted. So I have the first heading level 1, which is the title of the document. Then I have H2 for the lists. I have the lists heading, not the actual lists. And then I have our 2 paragraphs here. Now I have the actual list here. And if you notice, there's some text in there that isn't part of it. So we'll need to make sure we put that in there. And then there's the next H2. There's the couple paragraphs before it, and then there's the next table, and so forth and so on. So I already started our list here, but we need to fix it up. So if I open it up, I can see how it's broken down. As I move through this, I do want to point out any like subsequent list. So if you have like a sub point underneath a bullet point, that's a new list that's just put inside the other one. So if I open up this list item, there's the list body. If I open that up, I have our paragraph, which is our first tag, or sorry, first line here. So that's our content of the first bullet. And then I have a second list, which is that sub bullet underneath it. I open that up. Again, I have the line item or list item. Then I have the list item body, and then I have its content in a paragraph tag. I'm just going to pause quick. All right, I have Q&A here. You're not seeing the Z. Okay. I call it a Z. It's probably called something else. But if you have, now you have to have Adobe Acrobat Pro. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the start of this presentation. If you're using like Acrobat Reader, it's not going to be there because the tools we're using, you need the paid version for. You should be able to see it on the left here if you have Acrobat Pro. If you don't, you might need to open up the accessibility tool in order to get it. if I close that, and if I go to accessibility tool, if I go to reading order, if you open up reading order from the accessibility tool, and then the second button at the bottom there is show order panel, that'll open up that panel on the left for you as well. So that's another way to get to it if you need to. Of course. Okay. So we have our first part of our list is properly ordered. Excellent. Let's move to the next one, where we have the start of it is pretty well set. And then now it's kind of broken up. So if you notice, this bullet point is separated from the text. That's technically okay. All it will do, it might cause a stutter in the reading of it. Depending on how robust the screen reader is, like JAWS or NVDA might connect those two. Other ones like VoiceOver or especially Microsoft Narrator will probably stop there and you'll have to press another input. So since we can do this, let's go ahead and fix that. So what I can do is click and drag this, and now a line appears saying, hey, you can put it anywhere under here. If I mark it just anywhere inside or put it near an item, it will put it on the same level, either below that item. If I want to nest it, then I need to put it over the actual tag name. So kind of more to the right of the icon, like over the text itself. In this case, because I want it on the same level as the bullet point, I need to hover over the icon for the bullet point. I can click that, and now this single tag has both pieces of content inside of it. Now I have an empty paragraph tag. I can delete that, and we're good to go. Now we have our subpoint here of list, and list item, list body. It's empty. So we need to get this text inside that bullet point. Pretty sure. Okay. Yep. So that bullet point there, if you notice, is in the wrong spot. I'm going to go find it quick. Yep, there it is. And so I'm going to pull this up to here. And then what I need to do is I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to click and highlight this text. And then I'm going to right click the paragraph tag, and I'm going to say create tag from selection. And since I was using an actual tag, it just places it in there. So I need to reorder this just to make sure that the bullet point is read first. But now I've added it to that tag. If I had right clicked like above there or something, I could have created a whole new tag. I could also just create a new tag instead. And that will let me define whatever element I wanted from it. So if I can show you quick, if I click new tag, this dialog appears and I can select what type of tag it should have. There's a lot of options here, but there's all your standard ones: headings, label, links. There's list item, list item body, paragraph, yada yada. So this is how you would assign or create a new tag and then put it in there. Title just adds like a name over here, so I never use it, but feel free to do that if it helps you organize it. So we've fixed up our second bullet point here, and we can continue doing that through the rest of this. So this list item, we need to make sure that we have a blank one here. Let's get rid of that. Another blank one, get rid of that. This paragraph needs to come up here because it's part of this. There's a blank here, we can get rid of that. So now it's in the correct spot so that it's read separately from the following. Now this is read as a single tag. So honestly, I shouldn't have deleted the other tags that we would use, but we would want to split this up again, just so that it's read as separate list items instead of one single element. So if we want to, this is also actually missing the list item body. So we need to add a new tag here. And I'm going to put it, I think I have to put it here. So new tag, and I need to go down to list item body. Okay, there we go. So now there's a list item body. I reorganize that, put that there. List, yep. And then, okay. So as you notice, there's only a single tag here. So I need to split this up. I can either do what I did earlier with the highlighting the text and creating a tag from it, or I can use the reading order tool, click reading order, and then click and drag boxes around this in order to create separate lines. So that way it'll be read separately. And then I can go back to tags. And if you notice, now we have additional paragraphs that I will need to combine, but I can do that and create that list out of these elements. So that's how we create a list in the tag structure. If you notice again how I mentioned how it's nested, you can see that visually here, where if I collapse list, it all disappears. If I open it up, there's your list items. If I open up one of those, in this case, I'm going to collapse them, but then you can see the list body and then you can see its contents. So that's how it's organized for everything in the document. In some cases, like you'll see, this has a section tag at the top here. If you have a really long document, you might use that just for your own purposes for organization. But like HTML, sections don't do anything other than help with organization. Sometimes it can also help with like styling and such. But that's just another way to organize it. Since this document is so short, it treats it as one entire section. But you can use that as collapsing points. So theoretically, I could just move all of these up and outside of section and get rid of it to be the same. But that's when you usually create a document, you'll see these and then see everything nested inside of each other. That again helps determine reading order. So your structure in here should be your reading order, because that's how a screen reader is going to interpret your document. Okay, let's move on to tables. So let's scroll down to tables. So I have two tables here. The first one, visually, you can see it's a table. Oh, another question. Can you go back to the reading order? Sure thing. So reading order. So technically, when you assign a reading order to a PDF, it's determined by the tag structure. The reading order tool, if I open that up, you can see page 1, you can see this, you can see these gray boxes with the numbers. That determines how it's read and in what order. It doesn't tell you the type of element though. You have to either know that from what you assigned in the reading order dialog, or you would have to go to the tag structure. The reason this exists is because it's an easy way to assign the reading order, because you can click and drag boxes. Well, if I open up the reading order panel, you can click and drag boxes around elements. It'll highlight them, and then you can click a button to assign a tag to it. So it's kind of an easier way when you're tagging a document manually or fixing up some of the auto tag issues that it's created. Like in this case, it tagged that entire list as a single paragraph or a single element. And so I split it up in order to make it easier for myself to assign it proper tags. And that's the kind of thing you'd be using this for. So, as I did earlier, I click and dragged a box around this one thing, and then I told it to be a text or paragraph. I can also, in some cases, like if I think this logo is just decorative, I can make it a background artifact, or I could make it a heading so that it's treated as a heading, that kind of thing. So the reading order is kind of a simpler way to reorder the document, and you can also see it visually in the list. but it bases itself off of the tag structure. So that's why when we get into this more advanced level of PDF remediation, we're dealing with tags. Oh, no, I mean, click reading order. Oh, I apologize. Sure. So yeah, as I mentioned, the reading order. Oh, okay, I already did it. Great. Apologies for the confusion. Okay, so back to tables. So I have two tables here. One, as you can see, is the data table here, where visually you can see the table, the top row, it has a black background and it has white bolded text because it's indicating visually that it's the heading row. And then there's a second presentation table where it's used for purposes of creating a form. We'll talk about that more with the preparing form. But for right now, if I open this up, you'll see here is your first row. And then here is its 5 heading cells, TH. Open that up, there's a paragraph with the actual content and text that will be read. If I open up the second one, then you'll see there is a heading cell because I created this on Word, so it assigns that heading. I don't know if that interprets correctly though, so that might be something to consider changing. So in this case, I can double click it. I can edit it and make it just a normal data cell. So if you ever need to edit these tags, you can just double click them and that enters into edit mode, and you can just type in what you want it to be treated as. I think Adobe, in this case, even though they're marked as TH, it'll still read downwards with that. So that might be something to consider because I marked these as first column in Word by default. So that's why that appeared like that. That might require some experimentation though, to see if maybe Adobe has changed it on me. I don't know. I hope to find out tomorrow because Adobe is actually doing a accessible PDF webinar at 11 Eastern. So if you're interested, go check that out. So another event, as you notice here, I was just about to talk about that, but do you do anything for the blank cell fields? Yes, you do. So if we notice there's that blank cell here, but it is in here already coded. We just have empty content there. So if I run the accessibility check on this, if I click start checking, if I go down to tables, you notice it passes. So this regularity error, that's where that would show up, which I believe, I'm pretty sure if I run the accessibility checker on here on the forms document, it'll appear here. Yep. So if I click this element, so that's telling me there's a cell in here visually or programmatically that is not tagged, in which case it's that last one. So that's where having that empty cell, we need to still have it in the tag structure, because if that cell was like in the middle of here, because for whatever reason I didn't have a city for the address or something, I would still need to maintain the same number of columns. Otherwise, the reading of the table gets messed up because you go down a row and then you go over, but then there's no cell, it'll say end of table, but then there's 2 cells on the next row and that kind of thing. So in order to maintain the structure of the table, you need to mark up the empty cells as well. If you're creating a table from like Word or Excel and putting it into PDF, it's likely to handle a lot of this for you, but it's still good to know these things because there is a chance you have to go in and fix it, especially if you're using tables for forms, because it's going to, you might have to go in and edit those for the purposes of reading order. Or for getting rid of the blanks that were created because now you've put in form fields and now they're no longer empty. So that kind of thing. So that's why we need to know the structure of the table so that we can edit it as we need to. As I have mentioned, the reading order tool does have the ability to do this. So in this case, there's show table cells. I have that always on by default. If I turn that off, if you notice, it changes the hue there because now it's just showing me the paragraphs for it. I can also show tables and figures that'll draw this big box around the whole table and tell me there's a table here. So you can assign that in this option. There's the table, there's the cell button, but that means I have to like click and drag around a box, and then I have to click cell, and I have to click the whole thing as table. So depending on your comfort level, it might be easier to do it in tags, especially if you've already ported this from another program. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get to forms. So let me close the accessibility tool. So the second document was created from the first one. What I did is there is the prepare forms tool. I have it on the right sidebar because I've added this shortcut, but you would go up to tools on the top ribbon. You would go down to the second group, forms and signatures. The third button is prepare form. If you need to, for whatever reason, accessibility is in the fifth group. 1, 2, 3, 4, nope, fourth group. The last button is accessibility. That's how you get to that one. Again, you can use the little drop down to add it as a shortcut, depending on how often you use it. I use it all the time, so obviously I do, but it's really useful just to be able to click it from there. So what you would do is click prepare form. It'll ask you to scan the document, or if you want to use some other option. It will also have a checkbox for required signatures so that it will know to add the signature field. Depending on the type of form, there's two technically for Adobe. There's what's called Adobe Sign, which you can just use like an image or scroll, or like an option Adobe has saved. Or there is the digital ID signature, which regular Adobe forms use, but that requires you having a security certificate that you've registered. So that usually doesn't come up unless you're doing it on behalf of a company. Underneath the start button here, there is also a form field auto detection is on. That's on by default. You can change that. I wouldn't, because it does save you some work, because it's probably going to get 70 to 80% of your form right, especially if you've drawn the boxes on there. So I would leave it, but it's up to you how you want to handle that. I'm going to cancel this. So let me open up prepare forms here, and I'm going to zoom in. So because I had those table cells underlined in this document, it created form fields here because it saw, hey, there's an underscore here, so I'll create a form field. It actually put some form fields in the table above it. I deleted them because I didn't need it. Get rid of accessibility checker. But that's how this works, is that it scans for anything like the cells or for the underscores or the underlines here and puts form fields. On the second page where I had set up the example, it didn't create anything. So this is where we'll have to add fields. One thing I wanted to point out is, if you notice, it added first name here, or added last name and email, because that was the closest text. This is a little far away. So it tried to assign what it thought was the label, but it missed because we set it up this a different way. So I need to double click, and now I have the text field properties, and I need to change this to first name. And I'm going to copy and paste it into the tooltip. A couple other things I can do here is I can make this required. So if I click required, if you're using like Adobe Sign, that will make it required when you send the form to someone. If they're working just out of the file, it won't actually require it because it's treating it separate in a different way. But it is useful to have because it's also going to communicate to users this is a required field. I can also change the appearance however I wish. Usually what I like to do is I like to put on, well, I'm just going to use, I like to put on the underlined field because that way well, in those blank spaces, I still have a visible indicator that the form field is there. Font size is usually on auto. I usually like to just assign the font because otherwise it does this scaling thing depending on how much text you put in there. And if they put in too much, it's going to shrink it to make it unreadable. So it's useful to set a font size. Options is where you can put in things like check spelling. If you have like a text area, like, here's a big box to add additional comments or something, that's where you can put in like multi-line so that instead of just scrolling forever, which is the next option, scroll long text, you can instead make it fit to the box and just continue down in the box. So that's useful to have. Then there's also here's where you can put like the limit of characters they can have. Actions and validate are where you would put in and calculate are kind of more for like the scripting and such if you do that. The format tab is useful because this is where I can assign it a way to act. So in this case, I want none on this, but if I go to phone, if I double click phone, I can go here and I can put a number and then I can say I need 10 spots. I can change the separator, that kind of thing. I can say, oh, well, that's decimal places. I realize, so I don't want it decimal places, that kind of thing. There's also special special options. Here's where, well, there's phone number. I don't need to do that, but here's like zip code, there's social security number. Social security number is nice because it creates a mask for you. Or if you just need to mask it in general, you can put an arbitrary mask on the field as well so that it hides it from users after they filled it in. So I can tell it behave like a phone number. So any information they put in there will now be treated as a phone number. I need to make sure I do this. If you create any instructional form fields, which sometimes you might need to as a solution, there is the visible but doesn't print, which means that a screen reader can find it, read it out, but you won't see it if you print it out. They won't have like a little box or anything there or whatever. I like to do that in some cases where the form is, the document is fighting me, like if I'm working with a scanned document or someone else's work where I can't edit the actual PDF, I will sometimes do that where I'll create a form field, like I want to do like a tiny little box here, and then I'll go all properties, and then I'll say presentation sample, put that in the tooltip, and then visible but doesn't print, and then make it read only. If I do that, now I have instructions that fit inside the form if they're going just from field to field. This was a way years ago in order to handle forms because Adobe wasn't able to really connect the surrounding text with forms yet. It's since improved, so you don't have to do this, but it's still a nice option to have in the event that you're working with like an older document or you're just having trouble getting it to behave properly, especially in the reading order. And sometimes it's easier to just say, here's all new instructions in form fields that are read only, ignore all of the other text. That's a last resort though, so just be aware of that. You shouldn't have to do that anymore. So I do want to go down to the bottom here. For the sake of time, I'm going to show you just some other options you can do, such as a drop down. If I click here, I can then resize this. Doesn't need to be that big, but whatever. This is where I can say state. And then I want to say, select abbreviation. Then the tooltip. Then in options, this is where I would add our states. So New York, add that, add Maryland, add Virginia, that kind of thing. And then I can say, here's your item list. Whatever one I select in the list is going to be the default that you see. You can allow users to enter custom text if you so want. Or I can, add another thing saying select, add that. The export value is if you're doing any calculations or validations, so be aware of that, but I can move this up and highlight it and that'll be the default. So whenever you see that form field, you'll see that first option there. So that's drop downs. If you notice now it's created, whenever I create a field, it's always going to appear at the bottom. So that's where I would need to click and drag things up and down. So in this case, this button next to fields, the 3 lines is your order. So it always defaults to order tabs by structure. I want to say manually, and it'll give you this warning. Click OK. So now the document will read how you intend people to read it. If you need to, after you've done styling or something to a form field, you can right click and say use current properties as new defaults. So that means now if I go back down and I create a new text field for first name here, if I click it, if you notice, it has the same properties as the other one. It has the same appearance, that kind of thing. It doesn't apply the general things though. You still need to put the name, tooltip, and like read only are required, but it's helpful for making all of your fields have the same appearance by default, and some other options like the multi-line or scroll along text and such. So useful to set that up. Radio buttons. Oops. If I want to click and drag here. Radio buttons, if you notice, there's 2 options here. Again, I'm just going to do it from properties because in general, I have to use this anyway. So the name of this has to be the question, because the way radio buttons work is they have to be in a group. So the options tab is where we would put the choice. In this case, I want this to be a circle. And then if I create a second one, still has the group name because it's going to default to the same group as before, but I can put in no here. And then if you notice on the right here, we have now, are you a US citizen? So that's how you create a radio button. And then you have the check. We can create checkboxes here for the same idea. Checkboxes are nice and simple. Same way, just making sure, you know, that it has the name and tooltip. You can change the appearance if you want. Font size doesn't really matter for checkboxes. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. So now we've created our form. Since I created this in this order, well, in this case, I need to click and drag this to put it up above that one. So now it's in the order I would tab through it. So now I go to accessibility and I need to tag these. There is an auto tag form fields option, second option on the accessibility tool. It's never worked for me. So I just do it all manually, but things might have changed since then. Give it a try and then be prepared to do this step. So as before, form fields aren't tagged yet. So as I mentioned, if I click and drag and I capture the name and the new form field, I can click form field. The nice thing about this is if I go to reading order, I go open this up, there's our first name, and then it's added the form field where we need it. So we have our field in the proper order without any problems. If you notice how this blank was created, that's because when I was creating this document, I used like tab and space in order to create those spaces. So it creates a lot of these blanks that I have to remove. The nice thing about like this section here where I use the 2-column layout is there's less of those. So if I do this, there's still one because I used a tab in order to create the space I needed to put the checkbox in, but these are easily dealt with because I can just delete those blanks and then we don't have that issue. With the radio buttons, I can select both at the same time and it'll assign the order. It assigned it out of order. So this is where I would need to click and like drag this one below that one. Same way I would do it with any other element. I can just click and drag and assign the reading order I want. So that's how you would assign the reading order for form fields. If I don't do like the label with it, in some cases, like if I just do this, it'll put it like at the bottom. So now I have to reassign it and try and drag it up to the right spot. And it worked this time. I've had it plenty of times not work. So last thing, if you're using a table. So in this case, I want to try and do this. Nope. I can hold shift to add a selection like that. So that way I don't lose my selection from earlier. If I want to remove something like, if I want to try and remove that underline there, I can hold control and that'll be minus, it'll remove that. I can click form field. Same idea here. Now tables, depending on how it's set up, might fight you, as I mentioned before. It's not fighting me here. Oops. No. That's because visually I'm down here. So that path is the underline. So I can just, well, what I would do with the path, instead of deleting this tag, it's going to, say, oh, it's untagged. I'm going to click background artifact. So it treats it as something that can be skipped. But as I said, tables will sometimes fight you. In this case, you can kind of see how Adobe's trying to fight me and say, oh, no, you're up here. I can try and click this and drag this above. If you notice now it's skipped to 26. This is where tables kind of fight you with the reading order with form fields. So that's why I recommend don't use tables for formatting. I know it looks pretty, but this step can kind of get frustrating. You can eventually get it into the right order sometimes. But in those cases, like now it's jumped to 1 and 2. This is why you don't do this, but I can instead go into the tags and write in the tags separately here in order to put those form fields into that table. So that's why we need to know how to do the table, because I can go into here. Well, I can grab those form fields. I think they're in here. Nope. Where are they? I'm not sure where those form fields went to, and we don't have the time to cover it, but I would click and drag those form fields into the correct cells in the table in order to fix that problem. It's a lot more work though, which is why I say don't use the tables. Okay, I believe I have covered everything. Are there any other questions people have? You can use either chat or question and answer. Okay, on the PDF sample document, when I click on the table, it shows as a figure rather than a table. If I scroll down, it shows the next area with the blank lines as the table. I'm not sure why it's doing that, because when I created them, they were both pictured, or they were both showing as a table. So I'm not entirely sure why it's doing that to you, but I will send out a new version. I will double check that it's working and make sure that that's not a problem. You can, though, if you need to, go in. You can also try and just reassign it yourself if you like, if you have Acrobat. So, but I will make sure that that's corrected when I send out the next version. If we don't use the tables, as you say, what will we use instead? As I mentioned, I like to just use blank space because that's a lot easier to work with. And so visually, I just make sure that there's empty space below where I would have a label. That does mean you have to enter all the form fields. So another option you can do is just draw lines, either with like underscores or with like a pen tool or something like that. Ultimately, if you really want to put in like a lot of work, you can use the table and then take everything out of the table and delete the table tags so that it's treated as just text and paragraphs. And form fields. That's a lot of work though. So I would recommend only doing that if you really like the look. But otherwise, using any kind of just basic lines or shapes, like if you want a checkbox somewhere, if you use like a square symbol or something like that, Adobe will use that as a marker for creating it. So whatever shapes you want to use, or you can just draw it in manually like I do. While we are at this part, I'm going to bring this up. If you have any further questions later on, you can reach out to us, contact us at mdod.nva@maryland.gov. You can also visit our website, Maryland or mdod.maryland.gov. The link in the PowerPoint will take you specifically to our page. If you're just going from your browser, you'll want to go to the resources heading and click IT Accessibility Initiative. You can see our future webinars, some of the ones we previously recorded, and any of the other resources we have available. You can also visit our YouTube channel. The user is MDTAP video. We have the IT accessibility webinar playlist under there where all of these are posted. You can also see some of the really cool work other areas are doing, such as the technology loan program that's that shares out devices. There's a lot of instructionals for AT there. You can also see some of the other programs we're doing. So great resource. With that, if there are no further questions, I believe we are done today. So thank you everyone for coming. As I said, this webinar, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully within the week. And I will also send out new documents and the PowerPoint as well with that. So thank you everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.